Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I was thinking this afternoon when I ran up to my room for a minute that I was going to need to call housekeeping because my head was exploding with all of these ideas and somebody was going to have to clean up all that. But it has been tremendous to be here. When Valeria asked me to deliver the closing remarks for this conference, she suggested that I should summarize the papers and presentations we've heard over the past 2 days. I quickly realized this would be impossible. Over these 2 days, we've heard 100 presentations, 6 poster sessions, participants representing 46 countries. We've been exposed to ideas from every corner of the world and from nearly every field of education. No individual could adequately summarize all of that work. So instead, I'd like to share a few observations about what I have heard, what I have learned, and perhaps most importantly, what this gathering represents. Before I begin, I want to make a brief confession. The remarks I'm about to share are the result of a collaboration. Over the past 2 days, I attended every session except one when I was getting ready for this. I filled pages and pages with notes. This morning, I took those notes, my observations, my photos, my questions, and my reflections, and worked with artificial intelligence to help me organize them into a cohesive whole. The ideas are mine, the experiences are mine, the voice is mine, but the process was shared. And it strikes me that this partnership reflects many of the conversations we've had throughout the conference about the future of learning and the future of human work. It also seems fitting that we are having these conversations here in Florence. When people think about Florence, they often think about extraordinary individuals. Leonardo, Michelangelo, Botticelli, Brunelleschi. But the Renaissance was not simply the story of extraordinary people. It was the story of extraordinary connections, ideas moving across borders, scholars traveling from one city to another, merchants bringing knowledge along with goods, patrons creating spaces where experimentation was possible. The Renaissance emerged because people encountered ideas different from their own. In many ways, that's exactly what's happened here over the past 2 days. 278 people, face-to-face and virtual, 46 countries, countless perspectives, and a shared willingness to learn from one another. In fact, after listening to many of the presentations at the conference, I came away with a surprising realization. While our topics varied enormously, many of us were wrestling with remarkably similar questions. The language was different, the contexts were different, the countries were different, but beneath those differences were common concerns and common hopes. As I walked through Florence this week, I spent time looking at art. This image by Giotto represents a world that is still deeply medieval. The purpose is not realism. The purpose was not individuality. The purpose was certainty. The structure defined the experience. But then comes Botticelli. The individual begins to emerge. Human beings become more visible, more expressive, more complex. The focus begins to shift. And then we arrive at Leonardo. This unfinished work fascinates me. Look at it. Part of it is perfectly done, and yet you can see the outline of some things, but it's unfinished. Leonardo was willing to leave questions unanswered, unresolved. He was willing to explore, to experiment, to remain curious. Perhaps that's one of the defining characteristics of every Renaissance. Not certainty, curiosity. Not answers, but questions. Standing beneath Brunelleschi's dome earlier this week, I found myself thinking about the challenges he faced. The problem wasn't simply building something larger. Florence already knew how to build. The challenge was that the traditional methods no longer worked. The span was too large. The old solutions could not solve the problem. What fascinates me is that Brunelleschi did not begin by asking, how can I do this the way it's always been done? He asked, what new structures are required? The question feels remarkably relevant today, not only in education, but across society. And it brings me back to our conference. Across sessions on artificial intelligence, language learning, digital skills, higher ed, democratic participation, intercultural communication, virtual reality, and educational innovation, I kept hearing the same fundamental questions. How do we honor individual differences? How do we create more meaningful learning experiences? How do we prepare learners for a world that is rapidly changing? And perhaps most importantly, how do we ensure that technology expands our humanity rather than diminishing it? Different presenters approach these questions in different ways. Some focused on AI, others focused on multilingualism, others explored mobility, inclusion, democracy, digital transformation, self-efficacy, or personalized learning. Yet, beneath these differences, several themes appeared over and over again. Whether discussing digital skills, prior learning, educational pathways, presenter after presenter emphasized human variation. Second, the importance of connection. Many presentations focused on collaboration, dialogue, mobility, intercultural understanding, and community. Third, I heard a lot about the role of educators. I heard many descriptions of teachers as facilitators, guides, mentors, mediators, co-creators, and learning partners. The language may differ, but the underlying idea was remarkably consistent. And finally, I heard a growing recognition that the challenges we face cannot always be solved by simply improving existing practices. Some of our questions may require us to rethink the very structures themselves. I heard several colleagues comment that while attracted to innovative ideas, they were frustrated by the intransigence of institutions and the difficulties involved in making significant structural change. That frustration is understandable. Structural change is hard. It was hard in Brunelleschi's time. It remains hard today. But history reminds us that every age eventually encounters problems that its inherited structures were never designed to solve. Perhaps that's one of the central questions before education today. Not simply how to improve what already exists, but how to imagine what might come next. We often think that the story of the Renaissance is the story of great individuals, but historians increasingly remind us that the Renaissance was actually a network. Ideas traveled, books traveled, merchants traveled, scholars traveled, Erasmus traveled, knowledge crossed borders, And because knowledge crossed borders, new possibilities emerged. Looking around this conference, I can't help wondering whether the most important thing that happened in these 2 days was not any individual presentation. Perhaps it was conversations between presentations, the coffee breaks, the questions, the disagreements, the unexpected connections, the email addresses exchanged, the future collaborations that have not begun yet. These are things that often change the future. One final observation. For a conference that spent so much time discussing technology and artificial intelligence, I was struck by how often the conversation returned to deeply human concerns: confidence, identity, belonging, purpose, community, agency. Perhaps the future of education will not be defined by some use of artificial intelligence. Perhaps it will be defined by whether we use it to become more fully human. Over these 2 days, we've not solved the challenges before us, nor should we expect to. But we've done something equally important. We've listened, we've questioned, we've challenged assumptions, not only those of others, but perhaps some of our own as well. We've shared experiences, we've built relationships. The conversations that began here don't need to end here. They don't need to end when we leave Florence. The Renaissance was not created in a conference. It emerged through the ongoing networks of people exchanging ideas over time. Perhaps our greatest responsibility now is to continue these conversations, to remain connected, to continue learning from one another, and to carry these ideas back to our institutions, our colleagues, and our students. During these 2 days, we've discussed improving learning, improving teaching, improving institutions, improving technology, improving access. All of that matters. But Eric Jans reminds us of something deeper. Florence teaches us that lesson. The Renaissance was not a better version of the Middle Ages. It was something new. The dome was not an improved cathedral roof. It was something new. And perhaps the future of education will not emerge from choosing among alternatives that are already in front of us. Perhaps it will emerge from our willingness to imagine possibilities that do not yet exist. As we prepare to leave Florence, I would like to thank the organizers, the presenters, the volunteers, and all of you who traveled to share your work. Florence is not famous because they finally perfected the Middle Ages. It became something new because people were willing to imagine new possibilities. May we have the same courage. Thank you.